The Network Podcast, episode 32. I am back. I'm back on a solo cast. The last solo cast, actually, I just listened to this morning just to kind of get myself in the mood, I guess, to do this podcast today, or in that flow, or in that reflective kind of state. And the reason that I also listened back to it as well was to kind of pick up from where I was at that point in time, which was, I think, February of 2022 or March. It was one of the two, maybe I think March. But nonetheless, it was episode 17. So if anybody wants to go back and listen to that, I would highly recommend it. It's actually one of my finer moments, I would say, in the world or in business up to this point. So today I'm in New Zealand. Actually, I'm in the middle of a holiday, just finishing the Christmas and New Year period. My mother's over visiting from Ireland, so we're in New Zealand at the moment. Her and her partner are out flying on a helicopter, looking at a glacier right now, which I decided to go against. Yeah, I'm not really a big fan of helicopters, but we'll get into that another time. So yeah, look, I'm in my hotel room. I have my coffee here, I have my hydrogen water bottle, and old school, I have a little notepad, and the notepad contains some of the lessons that I learned in 2022, some of the most valuable lessons. So if you've listened to Lee's podcast just prior to this one, then you'll have understood his lessons from 2022. Now I'm here to deliver some of my greatest learnings and greatest lessons from 2022. There's 8, and the 8 are the same 8 that I posted on Instagram. I just wanted to get a little bit more, or get into a little bit more depth. Now look, there was a lot more than 8. There was probably 80, but 8 is a really digestible amount, I guess, for everybody to kind of digest, who's listening to this podcast today. So no holding back, let's get right into it. Let me just give a little bit of an overview of my 2022 and the year up to that point that we left off in the last solo cast. If I had to sum up 2022 in one word, it would be growth. Growth and gratitude would be the two words that I kind of pick. And it's gratitude amongst the suffering that I actually went through in the year. Picking up from where we left off in episode 17, I was about to go to a mastermind with Kerwin Ray. I spoke about how I had a little bit of a purge. I had a bit of an episode, a bit of a trauma trigger in February. In March, that amplified. I went to the mastermind and basically blew the fuse completely by asking Kerwin a question in front of the entire room. A very vulnerable question, a very challenging question, and my body just went into a complete state of shock, a state of shutdown. I'm even starting to kind of slightly shake as I talk about that right now, because it was such a big moment for me. But that was really the catalyst and the kickstarting moment that I needed to really make some big changes in my life and take some personal responsibility for a lot of stuff that needed to be dealt with. So went to that event, blew the fuse, as one may say, received some amazing support from my table, received some amazing support from the people in K2 Elite, which actually kind of ties in nicely with my first point and where that actually came from, and its environment and the importance of environment, because a bad environment, for example, or putting yourself in a situation where you're surrounding yourself with people who are not necessarily, I say, good for you. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm making a little gesture. That can really corrupt a good character. So a bad environment can corrupt a good character, and that quote itself actually came from a video I saw of Richard Manna. Fantastic little clip that was on Instagram, but it's so true. And we have a whole podcast as well on environment if you go back a little bit. But in that moment when I had that vulnerable breakdown, when I had the burnout, like that really amplified the burnout, because it was almost like I met myself for the first time, and that exposed such a wound, it exposed such a scar, that it kind of made sense for everything else that was going on around me at that time and in my life up to that point. Why I was an overachiever, why I was always striving for success, why I felt the need to keep myself busy all the time. And it was such a protection mechanism from that bigger trauma. And that kind of delved me into the world of my own kind of, I guess, recovery, you could say. My own journey of understanding myself more, understanding my ego more, understanding my protector more, understanding me after meeting myself for the first time. So that looked like a lot of things, but in the process of that, and in the process of the year, I abandoned myself many times. Another big lesson from the year, which isn't really in here, is not filling my calendar up too much, and that was a big mistake, because I went through this trauma, I went through this really heart-wrenching, energetically draining storm is the best way to put it, of emotions, of everything, and I still had to put on a brave face and show up as the person who people expected me to be, as Eoin McCarthy, as Area Academy, as just follow through on my commitments, which is something which is also a really high value to me. So there was times where, my partner saw me at my most vulnerable. Lee, he saw me at my most vulnerable, and there was days where I didn't really even want to be doing what I'm doing. I just wanted some time off. I wanted some time to myself. I wanted some time to recover. And luckily enough for me, I had the right environment around me to be able to support that when it did come up, because I'm all for growth, I'm all for success in business, I'm all for achieving my business goals, but the business is going to be a direct reflection of me and where I was at that point in time. So having that right support network, getting the right advice from the right people, and doing the things that were actually going to help me progress forward was key. It was fundamental. So not long after Mastermind, I started doing some work with tapping, some emotional freedom techniques with a lovely lady that I can recommend anybody to if you're going through something similar. That really helped me uncover a lot more about myself. I dug some stuff out from the past that I didn't even realize I was holding on to from childhood, from friendships in childhood, from like abandonment in friendships, school stuff, like crazy stuff that I was digging out that I didn't realize was even there. So not having that environment, not having the right people around me this year to support me when I was at my most vulnerable, when I needed to push to grow, when I needed the right information for business, all of the above. Environment is everything. So that was point number 1 that I have written down here. And I think, the importance of a podcast like this is just to be able to elaborate on certain topics, because, it's great to swipe through that Instagram post and see what I've written, the very manufactured version, but this is the deeper dig into each of the lessons. So point number 2 that I have on the list. That's feeling quite heavy already, I'm not going to lie. Material success is not as important as health and relationships. So, tying that into point number one, for such a long time, I chased material success because I thought that was what was going to bring me happiness, when in fact it was only a distraction that was coming at the cost of my health and my relationships. So what I've realized, through numerous sources, through my own reflections, is the fact that my health comes first. It comes before nearly everything. I don't drink as much alcohol anymore. I'm not on top of my diet. Many reasons maybe for that too, in terms of distractions and the ego. But yeah, my health became my number one priority. After I had that shutdown at Mastermind, once my body just completely wiped itself, that became my priority, my health and my relationship with myself. So my relationships are my relationship with myself, my loved ones, my family, my team, my clients, my people in business, my friends, whatever it may be. And that was all coming at the cost of me trying to seek out happiness in material success. So that was a really huge lesson. There's one thing detaching from it and getting rid of some of the material success, but then still chasing achievement, in a sense, is still the material success. But because without my health as the foundation, as Stephen Bartlett always talks about, your health is like the table that holds everything on it. But if the table's not there, everything falls to the ground. The table holds your business, it holds your family, it holds your relationships, it holds all of these different things. And if that falls to the ground, then basically I'm fucked. So I put that first. I switched up a lot. I actually started floating after that mastermind, and I'm going to get straight into another point, because I'm going to skip one because this is a really good one. Burnout is not tiredness, and I'm not invincible. So what I started to realize then was that I actually compounded this burnout for such a long period of time that it was going to take me several months, and even up to only kind of around now, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. So it really ran me down on a lot of levels, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all my kind of hormones in the body, my genetic makeup, and I'll talk a little bit about this now in a second as well, my whoop, which I'm pointing to in the camera. But I started floating, and the floating has really helped me in terms of finding a place that I can go on a weekly basis. So I've been doing it every week, sometimes twice a week, in the early stages of the burnout. And you basically go into a sensory deprivation tank, and what that means is you shut off all of your senses, and all you have is you and your mind, and you just quieten the noise. And by God, does it make me realize, did it make me realize how much noise there is in the world? There is a phenomenal amount of noise. And as I started to kind of venture back into the barbershop, it was really apparent to me how much stimulation, how much noise that I'd been around my entire life, and how that compounds, and how actually unhealthy that has been for me. So I put a big emphasis on my recovery. I put that first. I structured everything else around that. That went well a lot of the time. It went not so well a lot of the time as well, because again, just coming back to my kind of addiction for work, that would sometimes creep in, or sometimes my schedule would just be too hectic at any given time. And when that was the case, when my schedule was too hectic, I didn't feel like I had much of a choice, because I was people pleasing. People had expectations of me. At the end of the last podcast, I spoke about some of the people that I've been been coaching, I feel like I had to show up as an example for them, bringing my experiences to them to show them that this is what can happen. Please don't go down the same road as me. Please don't go down that same route of burnout. Put your health first, put your wellness first, put your mind first, put your relationships first, relationship with self first, every other relationship second. And put measures in place in life. And for me, I put some really strict measures in place, and that even looked like at one point going to the Gold Coast for a couple of months and having a break from everything, even having a break from my relationship. And that was really quite challenging, like I needed that space. I had, fortunately I had the people in my life at that time that could give me that space and gift me that space to actually heal and come from a place that's not of survival, which I'd been living in my whole life up to that point. So burnout's not just tiredness, throwing it around willy-nilly at the end of a work week, finishing in the barbershop and saying, oh, I'm so burnt out. Yeah, you might feel tired, but burnout is an accumulation of doing that every single week for a long period of time and not giving yourself what you need, abandoning yourself for the needs of others and people pleasing. And that's what it looked like for me. They were the symptoms. So if anyone is feeling any of that up to this point, please do feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with any one of you guys about some tips and tricks to kind of change that schedule. A little bit of a coffee break. Okay. So point number 4, which was point number 3, serendipity and the universe having your back. So more and more this year, I've learned to trust exactly where I'm supposed to be at any given time. So let me go back to the story. Went to March Mastermind, had that experience, burnt out. In May, so in between May and March, I did the tapping and emotional freedom work. Really did a lot of therapy, basically is what it was. And I went back to a Kerwin Ray event, the same event that triggered me in February. This time, however, I was part of the crew. So that was a different experience. I wasn't there as an attendee, I was there as part of crew, which is actually a different event because we had a crew room, and in the crew room we were doing different things, different activities, like learning different skills about business that you wouldn't necessarily learn in Nail It and Scale It. So in the crew room, fantastic, learned how to hold space. That was the biggest lesson of all. There was times where we would sit for 20-30 minutes and just hold space for somebody who was having a vulnerable moment or expressing a vulnerable moment and not feeling the need to fill that space, which is something that I realised I've never really had. A lot of people in my life are very solutions based. They want to give me the solutions but don't want to hold the space for me to actually just express how I'm feeling. But to get back to the point of serendipity, as crew, we have the opportunity in the Kerwin Ray space to actually go into the room where the event is happening and be in the room for certain moments, certain sessions, maybe a couple of hours where we can sit in and listen to a certain session. So my role in crew was doors. So I was on the doors, and my shift in the room just so happened to be the shift that was basically the exact same session that triggered me initially. And I remember sitting there and listening to it and listening to Kerwin express himself. This was the second time that he'd done this since his stroke. So maybe he wasn't doing it on as an emotional level as he was the first time. But I remember sitting there and thinking, wow, like, I'm not really feeling anything. I'm not getting triggered. I've healed. I was like overwhelmed, like thinking, whoa, like I've come so far in such a short space of time, and it's because of the work and because of the investment and because of these shifts and changes that I made on my calendar. I'm healed. But what a serendipitous moment. But there was a part of me that was when I was sitting there and I was all happy thinking about that, there was a part of me that was thinking, I wonder what's happening in the crew room right now. What am I missing out on in there? Because I've healed, so I'd like to get back to the crew. And anyway, we had a little break, went back into the crew room, and it was just silence. And this was probably, I'm going to actually put this hour of my life as one of the most profound moments of my entire life up to this point, especially of 2022. It must be the highlight of 2022 for me in terms of the profoundness of it. So I went back into the crew room, and there was about 9 of us, I think 10 of us, that didn't get to do the previous session. And basically Marie just said, okay guys, you know the drill. And they just got the 9 or 10 of us. It was all silent, and everyone started kind of forming this kind of line, like diagonally across the room on kind of like a tunnel. And they just said, all right guys, you 9 that missed the session in the morning, we want you to trust us. I want you to close your eyes. So they got us to basically long story short, right? They got us to walk down this tunnel with our eyes closed, and every single person in the tunnel would say a word that they thought about you. And I just remember being halfway down the tunnel and my eyelids start flickering, listening to all these nice things that were being said about me. My eyelids start flickering, and then at the end of the tunnel, I was just embraced with this hug, this really warm, loving hug. And what's really strange is there's 300 people. There was 70 crew, right? There was 300 people in K2 Elite. There was 70 crew, and the person who hugged me, I hadn't had much interaction with before, but when my eyes were still closed at this point, but I knew it was her. I just knew, for some reason, I just knew the person who hugged me. I knew it was her. It was really weird. So when I opened my eyes, I wasn't surprised. And when I opened my eyes, walked to the right, they lined us up on the opposite side of the love tunnel and said, okay, you can open your eyes now. And we looked around the room, and everyone was just standing with their hand on their heart and looking at us, and just literally held the space for another couple of moments. So I'm even getting goosebumps talking about this, because it wasn't just me that was emotional. There was a lot of people, and I'm looking at grown men, grown women, business owners, families, all just expressing their emotions and in tears. And it was just one of the most profound and heartwarming moments of the year for me. Yeah. So the serendipity of that and how it was supposed to happen, and look, serendipity comes up for me on a daily basis almost. The power of manifestation, the power of what you're putting out and trusting in the universe. The universe has your back. It's guiding you. If you're listening to the signs, if you're listening to the right, information that it's feeding you, it's guiding you in the right direction. So listen to it. Point number 5, business growth will never exceed your personal growth. So yeah, that's just plain and simple, like the growth of the business and how much money you can accumulate and how many clients you can get and how much success and Instagram followers and the material success you can get. That will never exceed your personal growth journey. The one that I'm speaking into now, I'm kind of going in this ebb and flow between the both worlds, but the personal is always going to be the most important, regardless of anything else. So that was a really valuable lesson that I've learned from K2 Elite as well, and I have many people to thank in that community for that. But being on that continuous personal development journey and personal growth journey is something for me that has unlocked a lot of my shackles, my potential, and to be honest, it's actually just made business better. Because I approached business for a long time in a state of needing more and adding more to the plate, when in fact, actually slimming that down and going into 2023 now, we're slimming that down. I'm starting to offer a few different things, new things, and we're slimming down our offerings to focus more on the value, to focus more on the quality, and not to focus more on the quantity, which essentially will do more for the people that we help, but it will also do more for us on a personal level and for our personal growth journey, allowing time to do that. I remember there was one point in time this year where I've got all these amazing books, right? And books are such a great way of absorbing somebody's life's work of information in a short space of time. And that's much how I look at like mentoring and stuff like that. It's having that ability to be able to extract and absorb information and not pay any dumb tax on it. We'll get into dumb tax in a sec, but being able to get that from somebody who has put blood, sweat and tears and time into accumulating those skills, knowledge or expertise. So dumb tax is the tax that you pay on trying to figure shit out by yourself, basically. Dumb tax is the money that you lose by not asking the right questions or seeking the right help. And I've lost a lot of dumb tax, and I wish I reached out for that help earlier. But that's just part of the journey, it's part of the lessons, and that's it. Okay, so the power of language and how it compounds. That's the next point number 6. The power of language is humongous. And this was also highlighted to me actually at the crew event in the Kerwin race space. And it's taking personal responsibility. And even throughout this podcast so far, doing a podcast, it may seem like I'm sitting here and this is really comfortable for me to do, to talk in front of camera, to be here sitting, expressing vulnerably. I might make it look and sound easy, but in fact it's not really that easy. I can feel a little bit, I feel a little bit sweaty. I feel a little bit, heightened. Definitely not 100% comfortable. Much more comfortable than what I ever have been before, because it's an exercise. It's sharpening the sword. Every time I do it, every time I speak, every time I deliver information, it gets better and better, and it accumulates. But to get back to the point of language, having the ability to take personal responsibility is huge. And how that actually compounds, it's in multiple different ways, right? It's the language. First of all, it's the dialogue between you and yourself, like me and myself. And can you see that the language difference there between me saying you and yourself? Me actually deflecting that off onto you, the listener, makes that more comfortable for me. So speaking about yourself in the third person, which that is, actually deflects a little bit of personal responsibility instead of speaking from a place of I. And this is something that I learned from the crew space. It's something I also learned from Peter Crone this year. And when describing something and coming up with a question or delving into something a little bit deep and maybe uncomfortable, it's very easy to deflect. Also, just the language and how you're actually interacting with people in your life, your team members, your partner, your friends, your family, and listening for the language and listening for the lessons and the little things that may have shaped you over time. If the story and if the beliefs were always there and spoken about in a certain way, then they're going to form your core actual beliefs, which lead to your core actions, or your core fears. So language is really, really important, and you know, to be in a leadership position, you know, owning and running a business, you know, even in the industry, you know, I guess a lot of people will see us as that, and in a leadership position, coaching people too, you know, like I coach multiple business owners, and they look at me as a leader. So for me to take personal responsibility, not to point blame, and that's the big difference between a leader and a boss, really. Somebody who's a boss, sometimes maybe they're not even aware, or they don't have these kind of skills, or they haven't been exposed or put themselves in the right situations or circles or circumstances to be able to develop these skills. So when somebody is oblivious, it's not really their fault. But now with this new awareness of language, like I'm speaking about, it's now my responsibility. It's now my responsibility to do better with that, and to try and think better with that. So like I said, throughout the podcast so far, there's been times in the earlier points, I knew this one was coming up, but this is just a regular day-to-day occurrence for me, by the way. I knew this one was coming up, but I'm very aware of my language, to the point where I'm almost self-critical, which I don't know if that's really that beneficial either, because sometimes I can maybe lose the point of what I'm actually trying to say. Because I've been in situations this year, coming back to environment, where people have maybe called me out on my language. So I'll be talking to somebody about a story. Let me just come up with an example really quickly. Oh, well, you know, when you do this, or you know, when you go to the fridge at night and you get the chocolate bar and you get the drinks, and then they'll turn to me and they'll be like, I don't do any of that. Not me. Don't know who you're talking to. And it's a bit of a sarcasm little thing, but it's that awareness. Is like, I'm going to the fridge and getting the chocolate bar. I'm going to the fridge to get the drink, or whatever it may be, right? Like it's me doing it. So it's the ego or the protector is maybe creating that language barrier between the two. And it's just a really interesting observation to make. So, you know, to think about what you can do there, to try and, I guess, help that, is just listen for the stories. Listen to what language you're speaking to yourself in, and what stories are you telling yourself, because that's going to form your own beliefs of yourself and on the world. And are they true? A lot of the time, they're actually not. Believe it or not, they're not actually true. And it's been really interesting. I've spent some time with family this year. I've been fortunate to have some family over here, and even just listening to their language now with this broader awareness can be quite challenging. It can be quite challenging, but I am loving awareness. You know, shout out to Ram Dass. I am loving awareness, and if I am loving awareness, then I look at that from a place of love and compassion, and again, oblivion. If somebody's oblivious to something, it's not their fault. It's just their conditioning. As I was. So taking personal responsibility, I was oblivious. I also know enough now, like I said in episode 17, to know that I know fuck all. So I still am oblivious. So I'm still learning. I'm no expert. But that was just a really powerful lesson. And what comes with that is, you know, asking for permission before just giving advice. And Lee spoke about this in the podcast, and it was a really big one that we both kind of unpacked this year, was the ability to be able to ask for permission first before just giving out unwarranted advice. And that came from our own experiences being in business. You know, after the crew event in May, I got back into work the next day. I was in a hotel in Sydney, and I remember just getting a message from somebody who's pretty close to me, just basically slating the podcast. And it was a bit unwarranted, to be honest. And I appreciate that person's opinion and advice, but at that particular time, I was very sensitive, and it created a reaction in my body. I just felt heightened. I had a nervous system response because, again, at that time I was still recovering from burnout. I was still very open. I was an open wound. I wasn't as resistant to it as I am now, because I've had a similar experience lately with the same person, where I wasn't triggered. I was coming from a place of loving awareness, and I was okay with their opinion, totally okay with it, and they're so entitled to their opinion. But yeah, that was just a really interesting observation, and I wanted to share that with you guys. Okay, so the next point number 7, getting through these kind of quickly actually. Gratitude. The importance of incorporating gratitude into your life, and the magnetic, energetic effects of that. Because gratitude and manifestation, they kind of they kind of go hand in hand. Like everything in the world is energy. We are energy, and the energy that we express and feel actually attracts more of that to us. So the ability to be grateful in spite of the suffering in the world is huge. And that's something that we went to Dr. Jordan Peterson lately. He was speaking into was gratitude in spite of suffering. And it's inevitable that there's suffering in the world. It's inevitable that there is pain in the world. And as you develop your awareness, as I spoke about in episode 17, as you become more consciously aware, and there's more information being able to process in the brain on a daily basis, you can start to see more pain in the world, more suffering, but hidden pain, hidden suffering. It's almost like people take their pain or their suffering and they wrap it up in a nice gift wrap, would tie a bow on top of it, a Balenciaga bow, or a Dior bow, or a Louis Vuitton bow, or whatever it may be, right? Look, and that's not coming from a place of judgment, but that is just the facts of what it is. And it can be quite a challenge. It has been quite a challenge for me, being able to see the suffering and not really being able to do much about it, because ultimately, as Lee said in his podcast, it's not our responsibility to save anybody. It's not my responsibility to save everyone. It's not my responsibility to save anyone. It's my responsibility to show up as my healed self, or to show up as the best version of me on that particular day with loving awareness to try and help. And, it's something I'm still working on every day. I'm still sharpening that sword every day. But gratitude is where it starts. Being able to look at what I have in my life and to be grateful for it in spite of the suffering. Because there were some dark times this year. There were some times where, like I said at the beginning, I didn't want to necessarily even work. I couldn't really be around people without getting triggered. It was just dark, and gratitude is kind of what got me out of it. Despite it all, I was still able to show up and be grateful for the fact that I was on this journey of rediscovering who I was, of rediscovering myself, knowing that the opposite is ignorance, the opposite is oblivion. So what is the alternative then? And that's something that Jordan Peterson kind of spoke into. Somebody asked him a question about articulation, and he said once in an interview or something that the most dangerous man is the one who's articulate. And, he kind of said, yeah, but what's the opposite? Would you rather not be articulate? So there's a choice, right? You can be grateful, or you can choose not to be grateful. You're the one that's going to suffer. Despite what's going on, yes, life can throw you lemons, life can throw you difficult cards to be dealt with, but that is coming back to serendipity. that is the path that has been chosen for you. Our parents were the ones that were chosen for us so that we can get the lessons to bring it forward to the next generation. And our kids are going to be chosen for us so that we can bring the lessons into the next generation. So be grateful for the people that you have in your life, would be my advice, despite what you may feel and think about them, because they're the ones that are going to bring you the most lessons. The ones who trigger you, the ones who trigger emotion, the ones who annoy you, the things that annoy you, they're going to come with the biggest lessons. The last and final point, and I think, I might go for a little bit of a ramble after that one, but we'll see how we go. The last and final point is, I am more than just a barber, and my job doesn't determine my worth in society. Now, this year I had some fantastic experiences through barbering. I got to go and cut Manchester United, Aston Villa. That was like such a huge experience for me. Growing up as a Man United fan, it kind of brought back a lot of nostalgia, a lot of memories. And barbering gifted me that through hard work, through serendipity. And it's funny because I wouldn't even say the harder you work, but the smarter you work, the more serendipity kind of shows up for you. It gifts you for being grateful. And yeah, I realized through the process of my recovery as well that I needed to get away from the barbershop. I needed to stop cutting hair, essentially, because it was draining me too much energetically. So I've worked to the point now, and I've kind of slimmed this down over the year, but I've worked to the point now where I only do 2-3 haircuts a week, if I want to do them. That is. So I do that, and then I do the academy as well. And the academy now, fortunately enough, is doing enough that it can pay us, Lee and I, a wage. And yeah, I've basically scaled my way out of the barbershop. So that has given me a really interesting insight into my mindset when I was full-time in the barbershop, and how dangerous that actually is, in terms of security, safety, and all of that going forward. Because having that one income stream, only really having that one way of being able to do things, is a dangerous place. Something happens, you get sick, like I kind of did. You could basically say that was sickness. Or you get injured, like one of my clients has this year. So that's a big lesson for him too. It's not okay to just have that one income stream. Multiple income streams is the new self-care, essentially, because having that one income stream is too stressful, way too stressful. Too much depends on it, and we're living in a futile, volatile world where a lot can happen. A lot of things can happen, unfortunately. So getting that lesson that, and I knew it already, but it really doubled down. Like, I have a lot of value that I can give to the world. I've got a lot that I can bring to people. I don't need to just be a barber. I can do so much more than that. And, getting caught up with this identity of being a barber, like when somebody asks me what do I do, it's quite a hard question to really answer at times, because I don't feel like a barber sums it up. And the picture that the general population get when somebody says they're a barber isn't the picture that aligns with the picture I have in myself, the picture I have about myself in my mind. The self-actualization there, or that disparity, there's a word for it, but I can't quite think of it right now. And I only learned this a couple of weeks ago, but it's that the difference between who you actually are and the person that you see yourself as. And then there's the what society sees somebody as in its constructs as a barber versus what you actually are as a person. And that's it, I've got many more skills than just cutting hair, and it's just one of my skills, one that I spend 2 to 3 hours a week doing, maybe. And yeah, there's just so much more that can be done through hair. I love the industry. I love helping people in the industry, and that's where things are going next. So yeah, overall, the year, just to encapsulate all that, so that's the 8 lessons really, but to really just kind of, I guess, encapsulate all of that and finish up and talk a bit more about the year and the lessons, because I can tell you all about my year in a storyboard format. I can tell you all the things that I done and the experiences that I had, and that's fine, that's great, but really it's about now taking the lessons, and these are some of the key lessons. There was more, as I said, and as we continue the podcast and when Lee and I come back together, I will delve into some more of the lessons from 2022. I'm sure 2022 is my biggest year of lessons so far in my life, so they're going to continue to pour out over time. The most important thing to remember from this and from this book, from this little notepad here, and from my lessons so far is, find yourself the right environment. Put yourself in the environment to help you flourish. One that doesn't value material success as much as health and relationships. The universe has your back. Trust in serendipity. Don't, mistake tiredness and burnout. Sometimes you do really need that rest, coming back to health and relationships. Business growth will never exceed your personal growth. The power of language and how that compounds. Gratitude, being an energy. And you can also be more than just a barber. If you are a barber listening to this, that is. You can also be more than just whatever it is. Insert whatever you want to insert there. And going forward in 2023, I'm now in the process of, and by the time this podcast comes out, actually, I'll be just about to launch a program. Should I name drop it here? I won't, just in case. But I'm just about to launch a coaching container, basically, for business owners within barbering or the hair industry that are looking to scale their businesses and maximize their lives. It's an accelerated mentorship program, 1 year, that I've been working on for several months now, and it's super exciting to see where things are going to go. So I'm transitioning more from the education space now, more into the coaching space, and just helping other people really make big difference and big impact on many more people that I can even reach through education itself. So yeah, 2022, what a year. What a time to be alive. 2023 is looking to be as exciting. Doing less is the new doing more. Focusing and narrowing my focus is going to be my biggest thing in 2023. Just moved into a new house, so setting that up nicely. Got a new office space coming along, which is something that has been a dream for me for so long. And I'm really grateful for everybody that has showed support over 2022, especially through the more challenging times, as one may say. To wrap it up, I would really appreciate if anyone listening to this could reach out, and if you got something from this, please send me a message. Let me know what your key takeaways or some of the things that you might have resonated with are, and I'd be more than happy to open up that dialogue, open up that conversation with you, and even if it's not a conversation, even if you just want to reach out for any particular reason or talk about anything or just make a statement, that's totally fine too. I would be more than happy to to receive your messages. Don't forget also to check out the network, our online education platform. On there we have, right now, I think it's coming up to around 100 pieces of content for the Platinum members, which is insane. Lee and I have put so much time into this platform, and all of our hair knowledge and expertise is on there. Just a couple of clicks away, there'll be a link for it in the bio of this podcast. And I'm just excited to even see where the network goes next. What actually comes next for the network, and for Lee as well. I'm really excited to see what Lee is going to do in 2023 with his business moving forward, and what he wants to do with our business moving forward. And that's it. I won't ramble on for any longer. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that you all enjoyed this podcast. I hope that you all took, again, something out of it, and I'll speak to you a little bit more in 2023.